AMBW had exactly one rule that governed her entire existence as a working single mother of two. Nobody, under any circumstances, touched the labeled Tupperware in the building's shared fourth-floor fridge. She had written her name on it in permanent marker. She had added a small, deeply threatening sticker of a cartoon skull, purchased specifically for this purpose after Incident 1. Back in March, when someone had eaten half her jollof rice and left the empty container in the fridge like a crime scene nobody bothered to clean up. She had thought the skull sticker would be enough. She was wrong. No, she said out loud, standing in front of the open fridge at 6:15 on a Tuesday evening, staring into the exact spot where her carefully labeled skull stickered, clearly marked with her apartment number container of jollof rice and grilled chicken should have been sitting. No, 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 absolutely not. We are not doing this again. She checked behind the orange juice. She checked the vegetable drawer, on the off chance someone had moved it for reasons that made no sense. She checked twice more, with the specific, escalating desperation of a woman who had spent 40 minutes of her precious, limited evening meal prepping this exact lunch for tomorrow, only to discover it had vanished sometime in the last 6 hours. Gone, container and all. Not even the decency of leaving the empty Tupperware behind this time. Amara closed the fridge door with considerably more force than necessary, marched back to her third-floor apartment, checked that her 2 kids were still glued to their homework at the kitchen table exactly as instructed, and pulled up the building's group chat on her phone. Amara, someone ate my jollof rice from the shared fridge again. Second time. I labeled it. I put a skull on it. This is not a request for kindness anymore. This is a formal warning. I will find out who's doing this. 3 separate residents responded within the minute with sympathetic outrage. One offering a candle as a peace gesture. Another suggesting she install a hidden camera, which frankly Amara was beginning to seriously consider. Then, a message from a number she didn't recognize, saved under a name the building directory listed simply as Kwan. 4C, Kwan. 4C. I may have made a mistake this evening. Could you come up? I'd like to resolve this properly. Amara stared at the message for a long moment, something between vindication and fresh outrage building rapidly in her chest. 4C. The new tenant. The quiet one who moved in 2 months ago, kept entirely to himself, whom she'd exchanged maybe 4 words with total. One of which had been hello, and the other 3 of which had been sorry. Excuse me in the elevator. She looked at her kids, still bent over their homework, blissfully unaware their mother was about to go to war over rice. I'll be right back, she said. If anyone needs me, I'm upstairs having a very important conversation. She did not change out of her work clothes. She did not fix her hair, still pulled back in the same messy bun it had been in since 6 a.m. She grabbed her keys, marched up 1 flight of stairs, and knocked on apartment 4C, with the particular controlled fury of a woman who had survived 12-hour shifts, 2 children's worth of school pickup logistics, and now, apparently, food theft, all in a single Tuesday. The door opened to reveal a tall man in an expensive but rumpled dress shirt, sleeves rolled up, looking Amara would grudgingly admit later genuinely, sincerely mortified. You ate my rice, she said, before he could get a single word out. I did, Kwon Tae-yang said immediately, no defense, no excuse, just flat, immediate confession. I am so sorry. I need you to understand this was an accident of catastrophic proportions, and I intend to make it right. Amara crossed her arms, entirely unmoved by his contrition, 12 hours of exhaustion and 1 too many stolen lunches finally reaching their absolute limit. Buddy, she said, you have no idea what kind of day I've had. Start explaining. Right now, before we go any further, welcome back if you've been here before. Welcome if this is your first time. Drop your city or country below, I read every single comment. Now, I have to tell you this one starts over rice, and I promise you, it does not stay small. Stick around, because the reason he ate her food is way more ridiculous than you're expecting. And where this ends up is going to surprise you. Subscribe if you don't want to miss it. Okay, let's find out what Tae-yang has to say for himself. Okay, Tae-yang said, stepping back to let her into the apartment, which Amara noted, with the particular judgmental thoroughness of someone building a case, was suspiciously tidy for a man who'd apparently just committed grand theft rice. It's a long story, but the short version is that I had an extremely difficult call with my mother this evening. I have not eaten a proper meal in approximately 3 days due to a work situation I won't bore you with. And when I opened the shared fridge looking for the leftover pasta my assistant left me, I saw a container that smelled incredible, didn't check the label carefully enough, and ate the entire thing standing at the counter like an animal before I registered what I'd actually done. Amara stared at him. You ate an entire container of jollof rice, standing at the counter, like an animal. I want to be very clear that I recognize how insane that sounds, Taeyang said. It doesn't just sound insane, it is insane, Amara said. Do you know how long that took me to make? I got home from a double shift, picked my kids up from my sister's, made dinner for them, and then made a separate lunch for myself for tomorrow because I don't have time in the morning. And she threw her hands up. You just ate it. The whole thing. While standing up. I am prepared to replace it, Taeyang said quickly. Entirely. Whatever it costs, whatever ingredients, I'll have it delivered tonight if you tell me what you need. That's not the point, Amara said, though something in her voice had shifted slightly, the sharpest edge of her fury softening into something more like genuine, exhausted frustration. The point is, this is the second time this has happened. I labeled it. I put a skull sticker on it, specifically to communicate that I was not playing around. I did notice the skull, Taeyang admitted. In retrospect, I should have taken that as a more serious warning. Despite herself, despite the genuine exhaustion and frustration of the entire evening, Amara felt the corner of her mouth twitch. You thought about the skull and ate it anyway? I was very hungry, Taeyang said, with the particular helpless honesty of a man who had clearly given up trying to make himself look better in this conversation. And genuinely not thinking clearly. I recognize that's not an adequate excuse. Amara studied him for a long moment, this tall, exhausted-looking man standing in his suspiciously tidy apartment, radiating the particular genuine, uncalculated guilt of someone who actually meant his apology rather than performing it, and felt some of her earlier fury deflate into something more manageable. What kind of work situation has you not eating for 3 days? She asked, curiosity getting the better of her despite herself. Taeyang hesitated, something careful entering his expression. It's complicated. I run a company, and we've had a difficult few weeks. Board disputes, personnel issues, the usual chaos of corporate management. He gestured vaguely, the explanation clearly deliberately vague. I've been eating almost exclusively from vending machines and whatever my assistant remembers to leave in my fridge, which explains, though doesn't excuse, tonight's disaster. A company, Amara repeated slowly, looking around the apartment properly for the first time, the expensive but understated furniture, the single, tasteful piece of art on the wall, the particular quiet, careful minimalism of someone who could clearly afford considerably more than this modest 3-bedroom in a mid-tier building. What kind of company has you living here instead of, like, a penthouse somewhere? Something flickered across Taeyang's face, the particular careful stillness of someone deciding how much truth a conversation actually required. I prefer privacy, he said finally. This building doesn't ask many questions. That matters to me. For reasons I'd rather not get into on the same evening I've already confessed to eating your dinner like a raccoon. That's fair, Amara said, though her curiosity, once sparked, wasn't fully extinguished. Okay, here's what's going to happen. You're going to replace my rice, the good stuff. None of that pre-made grocery store nonsense, actual ingredients, because at this point you owe me the effort. And you're going to explain, in slightly more detail, why a grown man who apparently runs a company is eating vending machine food for 3 days straight, instead of just, I don't know, ordering delivery like a normal person. That's a fair set of terms, Taeyang said, something almost relieved entering his voice, like he'd expected considerably worse consequences than a firm negotiation over grocery quality. And, Amara added, already turning to leave, exhaustion finally catching up with her now that the immediate confrontation had resolved. If this happens a third time, I'm installing a lock on that fridge. And I don't care how many building bylaws that violates. Understood completely, Tae-yang said, following her to the door. For what it's worth, whatever was in that rice, it was genuinely the best thing I've eaten in weeks. I understand that doesn't make stealing it acceptable, but I wanted you to know it wasn't wasted on someone who didn't appreciate it. Amara paused at the door, something in his earnest, slightly awkward sincerity catching her off guard. It's my grandmother's recipe, she said finally. From Lagos. Took me years to get the spice ratio right. It showed, Tae-yang said. I mean that as the highest compliment I'm capable of giving after an evening this humiliating. Despite herself, Amara laughed a real, startled laugh, the first genuine one she'd allowed herself all day. You're lucky you're funny, she said, because that's the only reason I'm not currently reporting you to whatever authority handles interbuilding food crimes. I'll take lucky, Tae-yang said, something warm and slightly bewildered in his expression as he watched her head toward the stairs. Miss Amara, she said, glancing back. Bello, apartment 3B. In case you need to know where to deliver my replacement rice. Tae-yang, he said. And I promise, Amara, I intend to make tonight's disaster considerably worth your while. She headed back down to her apartment, still slightly disbelieving of the entire strange, chaotic evening, entirely unaware that 3 floors above her, Kwon Tae-yong stood alone in his apartment, staring at the closed door with an expression that had nothing to do with stolen rice, and everything to do with the sudden, unexpected feeling that he'd just had the most genuine conversation he'd had with anyone in longer than he could easily remember, and that he had absolutely no intention of letting tonight's chaos be the last time he saw Amara. Bello. The replacement rice arrived the following evening in a form Amara had not remotely anticipated, not a grocery delivery, not a restaurant order, but an actual, in-person visit from Tae-yang himself, standing awkwardly in her doorway holding a large paper bag, with the particular careful grip of someone terrified of dropping it. I need you to understand, he said, before she'd even fully opened the door, that I did extensive research today, and I found what several review sites assured me was the most authentic Nigerian restaurant in the entire city. I have brought jollof rice, grilled chicken, plantain, and something called moin moin, which the very patient woman at the restaurant explained to me for 11 full minutes. Amara stared at the bag, then at him, genuinely surprised. You went and got Nigerian food, from an actual Nigerian restaurant. I felt grocery store ingredients wouldn't adequately atone for the crime, Tae-yong said seriously. I also brought enough for your children, since I understand from the building directory that you have 2. And I didn't want them going without dinner because their mother's evening was disrupted by my carelessness. Behind Amara, her 2 kids Kemi, 7, and Dara, 5 had already appeared in the doorway, drawn by the smell now filling the hallway, both staring up at Tae-yong with the particular unfiltered curiosity of small children encountering an unfamiliar adult. Are you the man who ate mommy's rice? Kemi asked bluntly. I am, Tae-yong admitted. It was a significant mistake, and I'm working very hard to make it right. Mommy was so mad, Dara offered. She said a bad word. Dara, Amara said sharply, though she was fighting a smile. I would have said several bad words in her position, Tae-yong said gravely, which earned an approving nod from Kemi. Amara studied him for a long moment, something shifting in her assessment of this strange, formal, oddly earnest man standing in her doorway with an entire feast in a paper bag. You didn't have to do all this, she said. The rice would have been enough. I disagree, Tae-yong said. I ate something you clearly put real care into making, after a day I imagine was already exhausting. And I think the response needed to match the actual weight of that mistake, not just the literal cost of the ingredients. That's a very thorough philosophy for grocery theft, Amara said, though something in her voice had warmed considerably. I tend toward thoroughness, Tae-yang admitted. It served me well in most areas of my life, though clearly not in fridge etiquette. Amara invited him in, mostly because her children had already started unpacking the food bag with the particular ruthless efficiency of hungry kids, and within 20 minutes, Tae-yang found himself sitting at Amara's small kitchen table, surrounded by a chaos entirely unlike anything he experienced in his own carefully controlled life, Kemi narrating an elaborate story about her day at school. That seemed to have no clear ending point, Dara insisting Tae-yang try her favorite way of eating plantain. Amara moving between refereeing her children and asking Tae-yang pointed, curious questions about his life. "So what's the actual company?" she asked, once the kids had been sent to finish their homework, leaving the two adults alone at the table with the last of the food between them. "You've mentioned board disputes and personnel issues twice now without ever telling me what you actually do." Tae-yang hesitated, weighing, as he had the previous evening, exactly how much truth this particular relationship warranted. "Shipping and logistics," he said finally. "International trade, primarily, it's more stressful than it sounds." "Everything's more stressful than it sounds when you're the one running it," Amara said. "I get that. I'm a nurse, by the way, in case you were wondering what kind of chaos produces a woman who threatens food thieves with skull stickers." "A nurse?" Tae-yang repeated, something in his expression shifting into genuine respect. "That explains the double shifts. 12 hours, 4 days a week, sometimes more when we're short-staffed, which is basically always," Amara said. "Single mom, 2 kids, no time to cook every single night, so Sunday meal prep is sacred. Which is why," she added pointedly, "the rice theft was such a significant crime." "I understand the gravity considerably better now," Tae-yang said. "I promise, this will not happen again. I've actually started keeping my own labeled items in a separate section of the fridge specifically to avoid confusion." "Good man," Amara said, genuinely amused now. "Learning from your mistakes. I respect that." Their conversation continued easily for another hour, moving from Amara's work stories to Tae-yang's careful edited stories about business travel, until finally, glancing at the clock, Tae-yang realized with some surprise how much time had passed. "I should let you get the kids to bed," he said, standing reluctantly. "Thank you for this. Genuinely, I haven't had a dinner like this in longer than I can remember." "A dinner with actual children screaming about plantain technique?" Amara asked, amused. "A dinner where I wasn't calculating anything," Tae-yang said, something more serious entering his voice. "Where I could just exist without every conversation being strategic. I'd forgotten what that felt like." Something in his tone made Amara pause, genuine curiosity mixing with a small, careful concern. "That sounds like a heavy way to live," she said. "It is," Tae-yang admitted, "more than I usually let myself acknowledge." He left shortly after, and Amara stood in her kitchen for a long moment afterward, processing the strange, unexpected warmth of an evening that had started with genuine fury over stolen rice and ended with something that felt, disconcertingly, like the beginning of a friendship she hadn't planned for. Her phone buzzed later that night, once the kids were finally asleep. "Tae-young, I know this is unconventional, given our relationship began with theft and a skull sticker. But would you and the girls like to have dinner again sometime? I promise to bring my own food this time." Amara looked at the message for a long moment, something warm and cautious moving through her chest. "Amara, depends. Are you buying, or are we back to grocery store etiquette negotiations?" "Tae-yang, I'll buy. I'm told I owe you considerably more than one dinner's worth of goodwill." "Amara, damn right you do. Friday works. The girls have been asking about the rice man all evening." "Tae-yang, the rice man. I'll take it. Considerably better than the man who ate my mother's cooking like an animal," which I believe was Kemi's exact phrase earlier tonight. Amara laughed out loud, alone in her quiet kitchen, already looking forward to Friday in a way that surprised her. Entirely unaware that 3 floors above her, Tae-yong sat in his own apartment, staring at his phone with the same unfamiliar, cautious warmth and no idea, yet that his carefully guarded, deliberately private world was about to become considerably more complicated the moment his actual business partners discovered exactly how he'd been spending his evenings. 3 weeks passed in an easy, steadily warming rhythm, Friday dinners becoming a fixture. Then Tuesday check-ins. Then Tae-yang appearing at unexpected hours with small, thoughtful things. A book Kemi had mentioned wanting. A specific brand of plantain chips Dara had declared her favorite. A genuine Careful attentiveness that Amara found herself, despite every instinct toward caution, increasingly unable to resist. She still didn't know exactly what he did. She'd stopped pushing, mostly, though the careful vagueness around shipping and logistics continued to nag at her curiosity in quiet moments. Then, on a Thursday evening, everything shifted. Amara was walking home from a particularly brutal shift, exhausted in the specific, bone-deep way that came after losing a patient she genuinely liked, when she noticed the black cars. 3 of them, parked with careful precision outside her building, and standing beside them, a cluster of serious-looking men in dark suits who radiated an entirely different energy than the usual delivery drivers or building visitors she was accustomed to seeing. Her stomach tightened with unexplained unease as she approached the entrance, and one of the men, tall, broad-shouldered, with the particular watchful stillness of someone trained for exactly this kind of situation, stepped slightly into her path. "Miss Bello," he said, and the fact that he knew her name sent a fresh spike of alarm through her chest. "Mr. Kwon would like a word." "Mr. Kwon who?" Amara asked, though some cold, dawning part of her already suspected the answer. The man gestured toward the building entrance, where Tae-yong stood waiting, his expression carrying a tension Amara had never once seen from him in 3 weeks of dinners and easy conversation. "Amara," he said, moving toward her quickly, "I need to explain something, and I need you to hear the whole thing before you react." "Tae-yong, what is happening?" Amara asked, her voice tight with genuine fear now, glancing between him and the serious, suited men still positioned around the black cars. "Why do you have security guards? Why did he know my full name?" "Please," Tae-yang said, gesturing toward the building, "not out here. Let me explain properly." Inside, they went up to his apartment, and Amara sat rigidly on his couch, arms crossed, watching him pace with visible, uncharacteristic agitation. "I haven't been entirely honest with you," he said finally, stopping in front of her. "About my work, about what shipping and logistics actually means, in full." "I'm listening," Amara said, her voice carefully controlled despite the fear building steadily in her chest. "I run several legitimate companies," Tae-yang said slowly. "That part is true. But a significant portion of what I actually control exists outside conventional legal boundaries. I am not simply a businessman who occasionally bends regulations, Amara. I hold considerable influence over operations that most people would recognize, if I'm being fully honest, as organized crime." The room went very quiet. "You're telling me," Amara said slowly, "that you're in the mafia." "That's an accurate enough characterization," yes, Tae-yang admitted. Amara sat with that for a long moment. 3 weeks of easy dinners and thoughtful gifts and genuine, growing affection suddenly, violently recontextualized against this new, terrifying information. "Why are there security guards outside my building right now?" she asked finally, her voice tight. "Tae-yong, if this is somehow connected to danger, if my kids are somehow they're not in danger," Tae-yong said quickly, firmly, "I promise you that. The guards are precautionary, because a rival organization recently became aware of my regular visits here, and I wanted to ensure additional protection was in place before anything could escalate. Not because anything currently has. A rival organization knows about me," Amara repeated, horror dawning. "About my apartment. About my children. I've had security monitoring this building discreetly for the past week. Once I realized the pattern of my visits might be noticed," Tae-yong said. "I should have told you immediately, Amara. I recognize that now. I kept delaying the conversation because I was afraid of exactly this reaction of losing something that's become genuinely important to me. Faster than I was ready to lose it." "You put my children at risk," Amara said, her voice shaking now, fear and fury tangling together. "And you were more worried about losing Emmy than about telling me the truth in time to actually protect them?" "I understand why that sounds unforgivable," Tae-yong said, something raw and desperate entering his controlled voice for the first time since she'd known him. "I am not asking you to forgive the delay. I'm asking you to let me explain the actual precautions in place, and to understand that I would burn down everything I've built before I let genuine harm reach your daughters." Amara stood abruptly, pacing now herself, processing 3 weeks of warmth and connection, suddenly colliding with genuine, visceral fear for her children's safety. "I need to think," she said finally. "I need to get my kids somewhere safe, and I need time to figure out what to actually do with any of this. I can arrange secure housing immediately," Tae-yang said quickly. "Somewhere fully protected. For as long as you need, I'm not moving my children into some mafia safe house." Tae-yang, Amara snapped, months of careful nursing composure finally cracking under the weight of genuine terror. "I'm taking them to my sister's. Somewhere far away from black cars and security guards and rival organizations that apparently know where my 7-year-old sleeps." Tae-yong's face went pale, the full weight of what his silence had already cost settling visibly over him. "Amara, please, I need space," Amara said, already moving toward the door, her hands shaking with adrenaline and fear. "Real space, Tae-yong. Not because I don't care about you, God help me, I do, more than I expected to after 3 weeks. But because I have 2 children whose safety has to come before whatever this is between us, and right now, I don't know if being near you means keeping them safe or putting them directly in danger." She left, and Tae-yang stood alone in his apartment, staring at the closed door, understanding with sick, sudden clarity that his careful, deliberate silence meant to protect the fragile new warmth of this relationship had instead very nearly cost him everything, and might yet cost him considerably more before this was resolved. His phone buzzed. "Hey one. Hey one, sir. We have a problem." Surveillance confirms bike organization vehicles circling the block for the 3rd time in an hour. They're not just watching anymore. I think they're preparing to move. Tae-yang's blood ran cold reading the message, all the careful, controlled composure he'd maintained during Amara's confrontation collapsing instantly into cold, focused alarm. "Get everyone in position," he said, already calling Hae-won directly. "Now, sir, Miss Bello and her children just left the building on foot, heading toward the subway station," Hae-won said, her voice tight with barely controlled urgency. "If Bike's people are preparing to move, and she's out there unprotected, I'm going after her," Tae-yang said, already grabbing his jacket, moving toward the door with the particular controlled speed of a man who'd trained his entire adult life for exactly this kind of crisis. He caught up to them 3 blocks away, Amara walking briskly with Kemi's hand in one of hers, and Dara held against her hip. Both children visibly tired and confused by their mother's sudden urgency. "Amara," he called out, and she turned, her expression sharpening with fresh alarm at his approach. "Tae-yang, I told you I needed space, there isn't time for that right now," he said, his voice carrying an urgency that cut through her anger immediately. "Rival organization vehicles have been circling the block. I think they may be preparing to move against you, specifically because of your connection to me. I need you and the girls somewhere secure, immediately." Amara's face went pale, her grip tightening instinctively around Dara. "You said we weren't in danger. You promised me I said the guards were precautionary," Tae-yong said. "The situation has changed in the past 20 minutes, and I am not willing to gamble your children's safety on pride or your justified anger at me right now. Please, Amara, whatever you decide about us, about this relationship, we can sort out later. Right now, I need you to trust me enough to get somewhere safe." Before Amara could respond, a black SUV pulled up alongside them with sudden, deliberate speed, and 2 men emerged, moving with the particular calculated purpose that made every one of Tae-yong's instincts scream danger. "Get behind me," he said sharply, positioning himself between Amara's children and the approaching men, his entire demeanor shifting into something harder, more dangerous than Amara had ever witnessed from him. "Kwon Tae-yong," one of the men said, his voice carrying easy, confident menace. "Baek Jun-ho sends his regards. He'd like to discuss the recent territory dispute, and he thought perhaps your new attachments might make you considerably more motivated to negotiate reasonably." "She has nothing to do with our business," Tae-yong said, his voice carrying a cold fury Amara had never once heard from him. "Whatever grievance Jun-ho has with me, it stays between our organizations." "Jun-ho disagrees," the man said. "He believes you've grown careless, Tae-yong," distracted by domestic comforts you can't actually afford, given your position. He'd like you to understand exactly how vulnerable that carelessness has made you. Kemi, sensing the tension despite not understanding it, began to cry quietly, and Amara pulled both her children tighter against her body, her earlier fury at Tae-yang giving way entirely to raw, protective terror. "Take me instead," Tae-yang said quietly. "Whatever message Jun-ho wants delivered, deliver it to me directly. Leave them out of this entirely." The man considered this for a moment, something calculating behind his casual menace. "Perhaps," he said. "Or perhaps we simply take all three of them, and let you experience exactly what it feels like to lose something you actually care about, the way Jun-ho's own family suffered when your organization expanded into his territory 5 years ago." Movement flickered at the edge of Amara's vision, more black cars arriving rapidly. Though these, she realized with dawning relief, carried Tae-yang's own security personnel, Hae-won at the lead, moving with swift, coordinated precision that quickly surrounded Jun-ho's men entirely. "This ends now," Hae-won said sharply, her security detail forming a tight, protective perimeter around Tae-yang, Amara, and the children. Bayek's men are significantly outnumbered here. I'd suggest reconsidering whatever instructions you were given. The lead man's confident expression flickered, calculations shifting rapidly as he assessed the changed odds. "This isn't finished," he said, backing toward his vehicle. "Jun-ho will find another opportunity." "He can try," Hae-won said coldly, "but I'd suggest warning him that targeting civilians, especially children, tends to unite even reluctant allies against reckless leadership. He may find his own organization considerably less supportive of this particular vendetta than he currently assumes." The rival vehicle pulled away swiftly, and Tae-yong finally, fully exhaled, turning to Amara and her children with visible, overwhelming relief. "Are you hurt?" he asked urgently. "Any of you?" "We're okay," Amara said shakily, still holding both girls tightly, adrenaline coursing visibly through her exhausted body. "Scared, but okay. I need to get all three of you somewhere secure," Tae-yong said. Immediately, Amara. "I understand if you're furious with me, if you never want anything to do with me again after tonight. But please, for your daughter's safety, let me arrange proper protection until this immediate threat is fully resolved." Amara looked down at Kemi and Dara, both still crying softly, both clearly terrified by an ordeal they didn't fully understand, and felt the last of her earlier resistance crumble under the weight of genuine, overwhelming fear for their safety. "Okay," she said finally, her voice unsteady. "Okay, somewhere safe." But Tae-yang, she met his eyes, exhaustion and fear and lingering anger all tangled together in her expression. "This conversation isn't over, not even close. You put my children in danger tonight, whether directly or through your own silence. And I need you to understand that trust, once broken like this, doesn't just come back because you showed up with security backup at the right moment." "I understand completely," Tae-yang said quietly. "I don't expect forgiveness tonight, Amara. I just need you and the girls safe. Everything else, we figure out afterward." He guided them toward the waiting cars, Hae-won already coordinating the move to a secure location. And as they drove away from the scene, Amara sat in the back seat, with her children held tightly against her, staring out at the city streets blurring past, entirely uncertain whether the man beside her, the same man who'd brought her jollof rice as an apology just 3 weeks earlier, represented genuine safety, or simply a different, more complicated kind of danger than she'd ever imagined signing up for when she'd stormed upstairs about stolen leftovers. The safe house was quiet, secure, and entirely unlike anything Amara had ever experienced, reinforced walls disguised behind ordinary suburban architecture. Security personnel positioned discreetly enough that Kemi and Dara, once finally calmed and fed, seemed to genuinely believe they were simply staying at a very nice hotel. Amara found Tae-yang on the back patio near midnight, once the girls had finally fallen asleep, staring out at nothing in particular with the exhausted, guilt-heavy posture of a man carrying considerably more weight than his composed exterior usually revealed. "They're asleep," she said, sitting down carefully beside him, though the earlier physical closeness between them remained noticeably absent, replaced by careful, deliberate distance. "Thank you for telling me," Tae Yang said quietly. "I've been sitting here trying to figure out how to actually fix any of this, and I keep arriving at the same conclusion that there isn't a version of tonight that undoes what already happened." "No," Amara agreed. "There isn't." They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of the evening settling heavily between them. "I need you to explain something," Amara said finally. "Not the business details. I don't need or want to understand the full scope of whatever you actually control. I need to understand why. Why you chose this life. Why you're still choosing it now, when you clearly have the resources to walk away entirely." Tae Yong considered the question carefully, weighing an honest answer against the easier, more practiced explanations he usually offered. "My father built this organization," he said slowly. "I inherited it at 26, when he died unexpectedly with no preparation, no warning, and a board of lieutenants who would have destroyed everything if I'd shown any weakness in that transition. I told myself, for years, that maintaining control was about honoring his legacy. That walking away would betray everyone who depended on the stability I provided." He paused. "I'm not certain that's still true. I think, somewhere along the way, maintaining power simply became habit, easier than actually questioning whether the life I inherited was one I'd have chosen for myself." "And now?" Amara asked. "After tonight, after nearly getting my children kidnapped over some territory dispute you haven't even fully explained to me?" Now Tae Yang said quietly, "I'm questioning it more seriously than I have in years. Watching Junho's men threaten your daughters tonight, Amara, I have never once, in 15 years of running this organization, felt fear like that. Not for myself. For you, and for 2 children I've known less than a month, but who I already care about more than I know how to properly explain." Amara absorbed this, something complicated moving behind her exhausted eyes. "That's not actually an answer to what happens now, Tae Yang. Caring about us doesn't automatically make this world safer for my kids to be anywhere near." "You're right," he admitted. "It doesn't. Which is why I've spent the past 2 hours making some difficult decisions." He turned to face her fully. "I'm restructuring the organization, transferring operational control to my most trusted lieutenant, keeping only the legitimate shipping businesses under my direct oversight going forward." Amara stared at him, genuine surprise crossing her exhausted features. "You're stepping down? Just like that?" "Not entirely, not immediately," Taeyong said. "These transitions take time to execute safely, without creating exactly the kind of instability that invites more attacks like tonight's. But I've already begun the process, Amara. Before tonight, actually I'd been considering it for weeks, since roughly the second Friday dinner, if I'm being honest. When I realized how much I genuinely looked forward to an evening that had nothing to do with power, or strategy, or maintaining control." "Why didn't you tell me any of this?" Amara asked. "The restructuring, the actual danger, any of it, before tonight forced the conversation?" "Because I was afraid," Tae Yang admitted, something raw entering his voice. "Afraid that the moment you knew the full truth, you'd walk away entirely. And I'd lose something that had become genuinely important to me faster than I was ready to lose it. I made a selfish choice, prioritizing my own fear of losing you over your right to make informed decisions about your children's safety. I understand if that's unforgivable." Amara was quiet for a long moment, watching him with an expression that mixed lingering anger with something more complicated, more uncertain. "I don't know if it's unforgivable," she said finally. "I know it was wrong. I know tonight terrified me in ways I'm going to be processing for a long time. But I also watched you step in front of my children without hesitation, watched you make real, significant changes to your entire life within hours of understanding the actual stakes. And that has to count for something, even if it doesn't erase the danger you put us in first." "What do you need from me?" Tae Yang asked quietly. "To actually rebuild trust, I mean. Not tonight, not immediately. But eventually, if that's even possible." Amara considered the question seriously, exhaustion and lingering fear giving way, slowly, to something more thoughtful. Time, she said finally. Complete honesty going forward, no more careful vagueness about shipping and logistics. And proof, not just promises, that this restructuring is real and not just something you're saying tonight because you're scared of losing us. She paused. I'm not saying no, Tae-yong. I'm saying I need to see consistent action before I trust this enough to let my children get close to you again. That's more than fair, Tae-yong said. I intend to earn exactly that, however long it takes. His phone buzzed. Hae-won, with an update on the ongoing situation with Baek Jun-ho's organization. Hae-won, sir. Word of tonight's confrontation has already reached several of Jun-ho's own lieutenants. Similar to previous situations, there's growing internal discomfort with his decision to target civilians and children directly. I believe we may see significant organizational instability on his side within days, possibly resolving the immediate threat without further escalation. Tae-yong read the message aloud to Amara, watching relief slowly ease some of the tension from her shoulders. So it might actually be over, she said. The immediate danger, I mean. It appears so, Tae-yong said carefully. Though I want to be honest with you, there will likely always be some baseline level of risk, given the world I've been part of. Restructuring reduces that risk considerably, but it doesn't eliminate it entirely. Amara nodded slowly, absorbing this honest, uncomfortable truth. I need to think about what that means for us. For my kids. I'm not making any decisions tonight, Tae-yang, beyond agreeing to stay here until you're certain the immediate danger has passed. That's all I'm asking, Tae-yang said quietly. For now. They sat together in the quiet darkness of the safe house patio, the weight of the evening settling into something more manageable, though neither of them yet knew whether tonight's crisis had permanently damaged something fragile and new, or whether it had, paradoxically, revealed exactly the kind of man Tae-yang was capable of becoming when everything that actually mattered was finally, genuinely at stake. 2 weeks passed before Amara agreed to see him again outside the safe house, a careful, deliberate 2 weeks, during which Tae-yang kept every promise he'd made that first terrifying night, sending regular, transparent updates about the restructuring progress, never once pushing for more contact than she offered, simply proving, through consistent, unremarkable action, that his words that night hadn't been empty panic-driven promises. The rival organization's collapse happened exactly as Hae-won had predicted. Jun-ho's own lieutenants moving against him within days, similar to the pattern that had claimed Chul-min and Tae-woo before him. Apparently a consistent, almost predictable consequence of leaders reckless enough to target civilians and children in pursuit of personal vendettas. Amara finally called him on a quiet Tuesday evening, once her kids were settled with homework and the immediate danger felt genuinely, verifiably resolved. The girls have been asking about the rice man, she said, when he answered, something warmer entering her voice than she'd allowed herself in 2 weeks. How are they? Tae-yong asked immediately, genuine concern evident despite his obvious effort to remain composed. Adjusting, Amara said. Kemi's been having some nightmares, which her therapist says is normal given what happened, but manageable. Dara mostly just wants to know when the rice man is bringing more plantain chips. She paused. I've been doing a lot of thinking, Tae-yong, these past 2 weeks. I understand if the conclusion is that this is too much, Tae-yang said carefully. I meant what I said, Amara. Whatever you decide, I'll respect it. That's not where I landed, Amara said, though I won't pretend it wasn't a real possibility for a while. She took a breath. I watched how you handled the last 2 weeks. No pressure, no grand gestures trying to win us back faster than we were ready for. Just consistent honesty, actual proof of the restructuring, real space when I asked for it. She paused. That matters, Tae-yang. More than I expected it to. So what happens now? He asked, something cautiously hopeful entering his voice. Dinner, Amara said. This Friday, like old times, except this time, you're going to tell me the full truth about what restructuring actually looks like going forward. No more careful vagueness. And you're going to understand, clearly, that if anything like that night ever happens again, if my children are ever put in that kind of danger again, restructured business or not, that's the actual end. No second chances on that specific point. Completely understood, Tae-yong said. I intend to spend considerably more effort making sure that scenario never repeats itself than I spent apparently keeping labeled Tupperware safe in a shared fridge. Despite everything, despite 2 weeks of genuine fear and uncertainty, Amara laughed a real, warm laugh that surprised her with how easily it came. "You're never going to let the rice thing go, are you?" she said. "It remains," Tae-yong said, objectively, "the most humiliating moment of my adult life. Business complications included. I feel it deserves permanent acknowledgement." They met that Friday, at Amara's apartment this time, Tae-yong arriving with an actual homemade attempt at jollof rice imperfect, slightly overcooked. Clearly the result of genuine effort rather than restaurant delivery that made Kemi and Dara both dissolve into delighted, merciless critique. "This is not as good as Mommy's," Kemi announced solemnly, after one bite. "I'm aware," Tae-yang said gravely. "I watched several instructional videos and consulted with the restaurant that provided the original replacement meal. This was, apparently, still insufficient." "It's actually pretty good, for a first attempt," Amara said, taking a bite herself. Something warm and genuine in her expression as she watched her daughters critique Tae-yang's cooking with total, unfiltered honesty. "Needs more pepper. And probably another hour of cooking time. But the effort counts for something." "I'll take the effort counts for something," Tae-yang said. "Given everything else this relationship has survived, imperfect rice feels like a manageable complication." 6 months later, the restructuring fully complete, Tae-yong's involvement reduced to the legitimate shipping operations he'd maintained throughout, Amara stood in her now considerably more spacious kitchen, the result of Tae-yong quietly, persistently insisting on contributing to a larger apartment once their relationship had solidified into something both of them were ready to call permanent. Watching him attempt, for what had become a monthly ritual, another batch of jollof rice under Kemi's increasingly confident supervision. "More pepper," Kemi instructed, watching him add spice with the serious authority of an 8-year-old who had clearly appointed herself head chef consultant. "Mommy always adds more than you think you need." "Duly noted," Tae-yong said, adjusting the seasoning under her watchful eye. Amara watched from the doorway, 6 months of careful rebuilding, honest conversations, and genuine, sustained commitment settling into something that felt, finally, solid rather than fragile. "You know," she said, "for a man who started this relationship by committing federal-level Tupperware theft, you've come a long way." "I contain multitudes," Tae-yong said, echoing, without any awareness of the reference, words another woman in an entirely different, chaotic, mafia-adjacent situation had once used about herself. "Though I maintain that the skull sticker was genuinely intimidating, and any reasonable person would have taken it more seriously than I did." "The skull sticker remains completely justified," Amara said, though she was smiling now, crossing the kitchen to steal a taste of the still cooking rice, humming approval at the improved flavor. Dara wandered in, drawn by the smell, immediately declaring her intention to add extra plantain, the good kind. And within minutes the kitchen had descended into its now familiar, chaotic warmth a family formed not from careful planning, but from a stolen container of rice, a skull sticker, and a man who'd learned, over 6 complicated, dangerous, ultimately transformative months, that real strength meant giving up power rather than hoarding it, and that the best thing he'd ever stolen turned out to be an entire, unexpected life he hadn't known he wanted until it was suddenly, irreversibly his. If this story made you laugh over the rice theft and then hold your breath through everything after, drop a comment telling me your favorite moment. Mine's Kemi's rice critique, and let me know where you're watching from tonight. Subscribe for more stories about unexpected love, second chances, and the chaos that brings people together. See you in the next one.